Good morning. This is Jason Galloway, and this is my oral presentation on the accident at 3 Mile Island. I'll specifically be focusing on the lessons learned from this event. It has been nearly 40 years since the worst nuclear disaster in the history of the United States. Currently, the accident at 3 Mile Island is ranked number 2 on the events that shaped the nuclear industry on the Institute for Nuclear Power Operations website. The accident at 3 Mile Island was a turning point for a budding nuclear industry. This single incident almost ended the commercial nuclear industry before it even got a chance to firmly establish itself. In fact, after the events at 3 Mile Island, over 100 units that were either planned or currently under construction were canceled, including one in my home state of Indiana, Marble Hill, which was the most expensive nuclear cancellation in the history of the United States because it was nearly 80% complete. Despite being the worst disaster in the history of the United States nuclear industry, multiple studies have been conducted on the radiological and environmental effects of the accident at 3 Mile Island. Despite melting the core to the point that half of the fuel rods were damaged, none of the studies have concluded that there have been any adverse health, radiological, or environmental effects as a result of the events that occurred at 3 Mile Island. It would be very easy for us to be highly judgmental of the operators at 3 Mile Island that were in the control room that night. But we have almost 40 years of operating experience and lessons learned which have been incorporated into the nuclear industry operating philosophy since then. If you look at the 9 other events in the top 10 on the INPO website, 7 of the events took place within 5 years of 3 Mile Island. Yet 3 Mile Island gets the majority of the attention because it's the nuclear plant that severely damaged its fuel. At our site, the premature criticality event, which is currently ranked number 9, gets a lot of attention here at BC Summer since that's where it occurred. But everyone across the nuclear industry has raised the standards for safe, reliable, and cost-effective operation of nuclear plants today based on lessons learned and operating experience that we've gained from all nuclear plants throughout the industry. It's a cornerstone of our industry that we will take the lessons learned at other plants and incorporate them into our current operating philosophy. Had the nuclear industry at the time of 3 Mile Island placed as much emphasis on lessons learned as we do today, the events that occurred at 3 Mile Island may have played out much differently. For example, there was a Babcock and Wilcox memorandum issued that specifically cautioned against securing the high-pressure injection pumps if they started automatically until you were able to determine the cause for the low reactor coolant pressure. Also, this design of power-operated relief valve was a widespread known issue throughout the industry, and it had been a long-standing issue at 3 Mile Island Unit 2. As a result of the incident at 3 Mile Island, now procedures and policies must be in place for receiving lessons learned in operating experience and then disseminating them to the appropriate operating groups. Another area where the nuclear industry has progressed since 1979 is operator training. The operators in the control room at 3 Mile Island were severely hindered in their training. They had one simulator that was for both units, and they only received limited training, and as a result they were ill prepared to handle the events that occurred at 3 Mile Island. Today, we are required for each operating unit to have its own simulator. License class is required to include simulator scenarios, implant knowledge, and administrative knowledge requirements. Of those simulator scenarios, the majority of them have to be accident scenarios with challenging timelines. We also have to include a variety of scenarios including at-power operations, offline operations, cold shutdown operations, so we have a diversity of modes that we are well prepared to handle given any set of circumstances. Another area that we've come a long way in our philosophy is smart operator fundamentals. All operators are required to be smart operators. We're to have a solid knowledge of plant design and theory. We're to monitor the plant effectively. We're to act with a conservative bias. We're to have rigorous control of plant evolutions, and we're to be a team and work as a team. Another significant area where the industry has come a long way is in fundamentals training. The operators at 3 Mile Island did not have any or little fundamentals training. Today, every new licensed operator has to go through generic fundamentals training before they can even start their license class. Some of the topics included in generic fundamentals training is reactor theory, including coefficients, xenon and poisons, thermodynamics, heat transfer and fluid flow, and types of indicators and how they are affected by adverse conditions, how a source range instrument is going to read if there's voiding in the core, how a pressurized level instrument is going to read if the containment building heats up. Also, pump and valve characteristics, so they understand what runout is, what shutoff head is, what valves are used for throttling, what valves are used for starting and stopping flow. And as an example of one of the lessons that 3 Mile Island could have learned under generic fundamentals is an isenthalpic process. Because the operators at 3 Mile Island did not have a strong grasp of this concept, they misinterpreted the main control board readings for their pour of tailpipe temperatures. So what they had was approximately 2,200 pounds of pressure in the primary loop, and it was venting to some lower pressure. For this example, we'll say that it intersected this pressure line right here. So if we correlate the superheat temperature, because this is the saturation line, they were at saturation in the primary. This is the saturation line. They crossed the saturation line as they used a valve for throttling, which was the power operated relief valve that was leaking. So for this example, we're at about 130 degrees of superheat, which is what would be indicated on their tailpipe temperature for this scenario here. So had the operators at 3 Mile Island known this, they might have discounted it because it was a long-standing issue, but they might have said, hey, we might have an asymptotic process going on. We need to evaluate other things such as RCS pressure to determine what's going on in our primary. Another area, the final area that we're going to discuss today that the nuclear industry has came a long way is human factoring engineering. The main control board at 3 Mile Island was poorly designed. The controls and indications that the operator needed at hand for critical evolutions was not close by. The main control board design was not such that they could see every alarm that was available to them. Also, they did not have the dartboard concept. Today, our main control board must be free of alarms, or if an alarm is going to stay in, we have to know what the plan is to get it fixed and get it repaired and get it removed, so that any new alarms come in, key in the operators to an ongoing transient condition. Another area is procedure standards. We have came a long way with reinforcing procedure use and adherence, but also maintaining good, sound procedures that can be used by the operators, that are easily understood and have a clear flow path through the procedure. They're validated in the simulator if necessary. They're validated on tabletop discussions if the simulator is not available. But we have alternate path EOPs. We have very rigorous revisions. If a procedure doesn't work, we have to have senior reactor operator concurrence before we can continue on in that procedure. So we're much more rigorous with our procedure use and adherence. And another significant area is human performance tools. We have come a long way with human performance tools as an industry. All operators are required to use procedure use and adherence. All operators are required to self-check before they operate a component. All operators are recommended to get a peer check prior to performing operations. Just saying, hey, I'm about to operate this component. Can you verify that I'm on the right component and I'm operating in the right direction? Some steps, if they're critical steps, require a peer check. So another one that they could have used very extensively at 3 Mile Island with questioning attitude. They got a groupthink mentality and they all started going down the same path and nobody stopped to say, hey, What if this is not what we assume it is? What if this is the wrong path that we're headed down? There was no devil's advocate. So as an industry, the commercial nuclear industry has came a long way in raising its standards across the board. These are just 3 examples of where the nuclear industry has came a long way since the events at 3 Mile Island. My sources for this presentation were the IMPO website, the Rogovan report, and the Kemeny report. Thank you.